Because it loses so much energy. Because I'm purposely interested. I'm going to vote for would you like to start? So it's quite new when the student and somebody said, who's Robert? And so here we have Robert, philosopher and artist. Can you all hear me clearly? You can all hear clearly. The poster says it's going to be a brief talk on the philosophy of aesthetics. That's a lie. It's not going to be brief at all. It's going to be 1 hour. 1 hour, and I do want you to listen as carefully as you can. You can ask me what you like afterwards, you don't have to stick to the theme. But I'd like you to listen to this. I've made some effort to put it together. You make some effort to listen. Some years ago I was in Amsterdam and there was an American poet who appeared on stage. He was drunk, holding his bottle in hand. He informed the audience that he was going to spring clean his room. I wanted to spring clean my room. I threw all the furniture out the window. I threw everything out the window. I thought the room was empty. Then I saw truth. I said, I don't want that in my room. I took truth and I threw it out the window. Then I saw goodness in the door jamb. I took hold of goodness and I threw that out the window. Damn. Now I got an empty room. There's a flickering of a shadow and there's beauty. I don't want beauty in my room. And she said, you can't throw me out the window. You need me. I said, I don't need nobody. I took it, I threw it out the window, and I thought, what have I done? What have I done? And I ran down the stairs, and I ran down the stairs, and I caught her just in time. She said, you saved me. I put her on the ground, whacked her ass, and said, get on down the road. He was drunk. He suggested the Holy Trinity: truth, beauty, and virtue. Beauty was the only thing he felt he couldn't do without. The story I've just related expresses two essential ingredients of the experience of beauty. One, that it is a mystery, and the other, that it is indispensable. Physical hunger and thirst ensure our bodily survival. The sex drive ensures the survival of the race. Fear, too, has survival value, but what is beauty for? What personal or evolutionary end is met by the appreciation of a rainbow, this flower, or a piece by Mozart? Mohammed said, if I had only 2 loaves of bread, I would barter one to nourish my soul. Why? Many of our appetites have been developed in the course of human evolution for practical, measurable reasons. But to sell 1 loaf and buy a rose, why? Suggest the realm of another order. Hitler was hostile to art. This was because of his mistaken view that works of art are imitations, copies of things and events. And since the things are copies, are mere transient images, works of art are doubly fraudulent in that they are images of images, what you call second and third removed from reality. The aim of every genuine seeker after truth is to pierce the veil, he thought, and enter the eternal abstract world beyond it, But the effect of art, he thought, was to rivet our attention to the appearance of things like windows upon which pictures have been painted, and painted so thickly that you could never see through them to the other side. Thus, art literally puts the immortality of our souls in jeopardy and should be banned from an ideal state. Plato, in the Symposium, has much to say about progress from aesthetic appreciation to the enjoyment of absolute beauty. At a dinner party where all the guests have been trying to describe what they think love is, Socrates describes how his teacher, Diotima, instructed him in the following views. The man who would apply himself to this goal must begin by applying himself to the contemplation of physical beauty. The next stage is for him to reckon beauty of soul more valuable than beauty of body. From morals, he must be directed to the sciences and contemplate their beauty also. As this man approaches the end of his initiation, he will have revealed to him a beauty whose nature is marvelous indeed. The final goal of all his efforts, this beauty is first of all eternal. It neither comes into being nor passes away. It is not beautiful in part or ugly in part. He will see it as absolute, existing alone with itself, unique, eternal, and all other beautiful things as partaking of it. Now, this is an idea over 2,000 years ago. A major difference between modern and pre-modern aesthetics lies in the respective treatment that aesthetics received before and after the birth of modern philosophy. Ancient and medieval theories of beauty were undifferentiated from other fields of inquiry. Modern and contemporary theories are clearly defined, and beginning with Baumgarten, who in 1750 published his work Aesthetica. And that would have meant that he was trying to study aesthetics as an independent science. Aesthetics for the Greeks meant to perceive or apprehend through the senses. Baumgarten's term, Aesthetica, would have meant science dealing with sense perception. But clearly, the concept of aesthetics as the science of sense perception is not what we nowadays regard as aesthetics. Baumgarten is obviously saying that beauty is the subject of this science of aesthetics. It is something which is sensorially perceived. Baumgarten, like Descartes and Spinoza, was a rationalist. So we would expect him to hold the rationalist views on aesthetics generally shared by all ancient and medieval philosophers, beginning with Plato and Aristotle, and that view was that beauty was objective out there. As flower was beautiful, my attitude to it made no difference. Beauty was objective out there, like an energy force, like electricity, gravity. Objective beauty, being the proper object of the rational intellect, is a common doctrine of the great early thinkers. They felt that beauty was only intellectually knowable. But Baumgarten, extending the theories of thinkers like Descartes and Leibniz, came to hold the view that no beauty is rationally knowable. It is only knowable through confused knowledge, for example, sensory images, whereas essences, fundamental principles, such as Socrates' lesson from Diotima, are rationally knowable through clear concepts. So clearly, in one sense, Baumgarten is right when he says that beauty is the object of sense perception, and that the senses are the sole and proper source of knowing beauty. After all, we do need sight or hearing in order to experience events which we may regard as beautiful. International congresses on aesthetics are held regularly. Among them are scientists, philosophers, theologians, technicians, historians, and creative artists. Upon seeing a gathering of representatives of so many different areas of specialization, One soon wonders what, if anything, ties all these areas together. Looking at our subject historically can be helpful, but it is manifestly vast. The entire pre-Socratic period has as its most influential representative Pythagoras. He observed certain patterns and number relationships occurring in nature. We know that he was interested in the dependence on length of the pitch of a note emitted by a vibrating string. The explanation of the harmony of nature was for Pythagoras to be found in the science of numbers. He speculated that harmonious sounds were vibrated by the heavenly bodies as they described their celestial orbits, the music of the spheres, he called it. It was believed that number and ratio held a secret, that a geometric proportion, whether expressed in music, poetry, a building, or a universe, was a mirror, a subtle reflection of an abstract order, an insight into God's brain. The Pythagoreans developed a taste for mysteries. Special significance was attached to certain geometric forms, in particular the 5 Platonic bodies. The last of these, known as the Dodecahedron, and it was particularly popular with its 12 pentagon planes united. It was Plato's 5th essence symbolizing the heavens. The pentagram was used by the Pythagoreans as a symbol of recognition between members of their brotherhood and was called by them health. That's what the pentagram meant at the time. There's a pentagon. And it was believed not only by Pythagoras but by a number of later Hermetic philosophers that the 10 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are achieved by inscribing a line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The interesting thing is that another pentagon appears inside, upside down. And you can do that again. And there it is, reversed again. And you can do it again. And there it is, upside down again. Quite trivial so far. However, there was an ideal proportion, which they called the harmonic mean, or the golden section. Leonardo da Vinci was very interested in it. The Mona Lisa is constructed out of 7 of them. There are at least 11 of them in every Raphael painting. It was completely traditional right up to the 18th century. Come inside quickly. Just sit down this way. So if you imagine this is divided into 8 sections, the view was that the third point in was the harmonic relation, the position on that line that the eye felt comfortable. Don't ask me why, it's a tradition that goes back so long. And that proportion, the greater part, so the whole to the greater part is the greater part to the lesser part, is found in every one of these ratios. Every single one of these ratios will have that proportion, even larger versions of it. The scale of this in relation to that pentagon, in relation to that pentagon, in relation to that pentagon, is the same proportion. The construction of the golden rectangle, probably the most popular form of this ratio, contains properties that have fascinated the creative for centuries, from the Parthenon to Leonardo, from Kepler to contemporary scientists. This is a fairly conventional geometric formula, it doesn't need to be explained. Leonardo da Vinci believed that branches came off the trees at a spiralic ratio directly proportional to this thesis, that snail shells had that kind of proportion, that waves came in onto the seashore at that kind of proportion. 13th century, the mathematician Fibonacci, it was called the Fibonacci series. 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5, 3 plus 5 equals 8, 3 plus 8 equals 13. There's a ratio there as it builds up proportional to the same geometric formula. Pythagoras believed that mathematics is the foundation of the intelligible world and of the invisible world, spirit and matter. Proportions have, therefore, like ideas, an autonomous existence. They are the consequences of the arithmetical, geometric, or harmonic means extolled by Pythagoras and Plato, and are derived from the very nature of number. It follows, according to this view, that every line, every surface, every volume, whose elements are arranged in conformity with these proportions, reflect the idea of beauty. Beauty would rest on objective foundations, independent even of man. When Pythagoras had proved his great theorem, he offered 100 oxen to the Muses in thanks for the inspiration and in the belief that he had the key to the structure of nature itself. I remember someone referring me to a book which describes a temple in Turkey, supposed to be there now. And as you walked in, it had a certain height and a certain width, and each of the pillars that supported the enormous ceiling were a certain width and a certain height. The texture of the stonework on the inside was of a particular character. The quality of the white stain was of a particular tone and a particular saturation. The spaces in between the pillars were of a particular proportion. And all of this was designed in such a way that whoever walked in, no matter what culture they came from, would start to cry. The claim was that the structure of the building, a building constructed in the 13th and 14th century, over a period of 100 years, would evoke this particular state of mind. Obviously, a preparatory state for worship, for humility. Okay, it sounds a bit extreme and eccentric, and let's relegate the notion to poetry. But we're all familiar with the atmosphere of cathedrals and dark night skies and flat seas. We know that a particular atmosphere, a particular set of relationships in relation to our own scale evokes immediate atmospheres. I remember when I was younger, I saw the engraving by Dürer called Melancholia. You may be familiar with it. He did a series on it. Dürer, German painter, remarkable draftsman and etcher. And in it there appears a typical magic square, which fascinated followers of number symbolism. We can see how each horizontal and vertical line adds up to 34. As do the long diagonals. So they all add up to 34. And if you divide it into sections of 4, each of those add up to 34. This patterning delighted many a philosopher, alchemist, and legist. It excited them as an insight into the notion that the structure of matter and the mind of God were linked and could be measured. After Pythagoras, Plato and Aristotle make observations in the field of psychological aesthetics. They stress the importance of ethics by concepts such as the beauty of virtue, and so on. When I was 12, I was given a telescope, and I took it into the bedroom, and I aimed it at the moon. But I was too frightened to look through, because there was just something so dramatic and powerful about this vast thing, looking so small in the distance. And I remember getting quite a distance away from the eyepiece and just walking past and flicking because I was frightened of the dramatic increase of scale, the change of scale, that suddenly you should see a tiny detail. It took me some time to just look through. And I had a similar sensation with this wonderful woodcut, which shows a pilgrim leaving the earth behind him, the sun rising and setting is way below him, even the stars are below him. He climbs the highest peak and somehow breaks through the heavenly spheres and sees the very cogs of nature working the grand system. Delightful early medieval image. The centuries pass. We find Vitruvius and St. Augustine, Philo of Alexandria, followed by the church fathers and medieval schoolmen. I'm talking about the history of beauty, incidentally. All of whom evolved fascinating and eccentric aesthetic studies. Trinitarian aesthetics, Christological aesthetics, charismatic aesthetics, aesthetics of grace, Mariological aesthetics, Virgin Mary cults, and endless theological variations. In the light of this range of aesthetic inquiry, touched upon before the dawn of the Renaissance, it is no wonder that the next few centuries produced no new fields of aesthetics at all. Instead, they deepened, enlarged, and enriched the various branches that had emerged from ancient and medieval times. As the centuries passed, specialized areas began to dominate. Sociological aesthetics, special psychological aesthetics, cultural aesthetics, new theories about light, color, form, acoustical aesthetics, therapeutical, phenomenological aesthetics, and so on. Here we come to the first essential feature of the history of aesthetic theory, and it is this. Ancient and medieval thinkers writing on aesthetics were all aesthetic objectivists. They thought beauty was out there. Whereas a large proportion of modern and contemporary philosophers and aestheticians are skeptics, or aesthetic subjectivists. Early and medieval giants like Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, and St. Thomas Aquinas all trusted their senses and reason, taking the existence of beauty for granted, rarely trying to offer any proof for it. It was out there, in God, in nature, in numbers. With the dawn of modern thought, such speculations withered away. Baruch Spinoza, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, followed by an uninterrupted line of European and American aestheticians, doubted or denied the objective reality of beauty. They doubted this in a variety of ways, but shared the view that beauty was not necessarily out there. In ancient and medieval times, beauty was an absolute, of which other similar qualities, such as the sublime, the gracious, or harmony, were only a part. In modern times, beauty loses its central significance. It is beauty that is seen as a part of lots of other things. The mysterious, abstract body of the Platonists is dissected and dismembered by the 18th and 19th century thinkers. They now speak of countless characteristics which exist independently of the beautiful. Essays on the graceful, the dignified, the pleasant, and the sublime abound, enormous numbers of publications. While ancient and medieval philosophy considered ugliness the lack or privation of beauty, later thinkers softened this view. Schlegel thinks that there is beauty in the piquant, the daring, the cruel. It was not long before what was seen as the opposite of beauty, or at least a lack of it, could now be seen as part of it. Ugliness as a form of satanic beauty took an important place amongst aesthetic values. The film Frankenstein has just come out, written by that extraordinary 19-year-old woman. And the creature is upset more than anything else by the fact that he was ugly. It's a very typical ugly, sublime issue which the novel is written with. Let us remind ourselves the two earlier principles, that of beauty as an objective phenomenon out there, and beauty as a subjective experience. Fundamental to the subjectivist thesis is the recognition that the aesthetic experience is an emotional rather than a rational mental activity. What has been described as the greatest discovery of the 19th century, the subconscious mind, has contributed massive and complex areas of interpretation for what we may mean by subjectivity. Psychologists may vary greatly in their opinions about what the subconscious mind is, but they can generally agree on its importance in interpreting mental activity. It is invoked to explain such phenomena as hypnotic trance, dreams, dual personality, mental disorders, and much else. Its value for our present purpose is that it provides a clue to the understanding of the subjective aspect of aesthetic experience. The subjectivist may regard beauty as mere pleasure in the beholder. He can certainly agree that objective qualities of things are physiologically apt to elicit pleasure. Flowing and graceful curves, for example, might produce a natural and rhythmic set of movements in the optic muscle, but he denies the extramentality of beauty. Immanuel Kant remarked that every beholder spoke of the beautiful as if beauty were a characteristic of the object, as if it were a property of this flower. This flower is beautiful can be an aesthetic judgment, but it does not follow that beauty is to be regarded as the property of the flower itself. Clearly, the subjectivist and the objectivist are interested in three related issues. One, certain objective qualities in the things we behold. Two, aesthetic delight which is experienced once the object is seen. And three, a causal relation between these two features. That is, the objective qualities are the causes and the aesthetic delight is their effect. Thomas Aquinas calls beauty some kind of quality of the object that is the cause of aesthetic delight. Hume categorically denies that beauty is an objective quality. He says beauty is not a quality of, say, a circle. It is only the effect which that figure produces upon a mind. So in short, we see that objective and subjective principles can openly admit the existence of certain objective qualities which can cause aesthetic pleasure. Aquinas, proportion; Hume, harmony. And so they have no quarrel there. But while the objectivist applies the term beauty to those objective qualities that cause delight, the subjectivist applies the same term, beauty, to the effect of such qualities. Another common argument in favor of the subjectivist view is that there is little agreement on what is aesthetically valuable in an object or an experience. It holds that taste changes with individuals and societies, and that individual and cultural value judgments are constantly on the move. Indeed, Hume himself, though a subjectivist, seems almost to hint at an absolutist and objectivist undertone when he writes, "The same Homer who pleased at Athens and Rome 2,000 years ago is still admired at Paris and London. All the changes of climate, government, religion, and language have not been able to obscure his glory." Now, if disagreement about beauty was a sign of its subjectivity, the pre-modern philosophers would certainly have recognized it as such. They were perfectly aware of aesthetic disagreement, but they did not think that one man's meat is another man's poison proved the subjectivity of beauty. Heraclitus says people disagree on what is beautiful, though to God everything is beautiful. Plato, there's nothing about which there's more disagreement and dispute among people than about beauty. And so on. So despite this obvious awareness they had of aesthetic disagreement, they did not become subjectivists, but remained instead firm believers in the extra-mental, objective reality of beauty. I think this point is extremely interesting. They weren't dopey. They're still making the claim that despite the fact that everyone in this room will disagree about what they find attractive or appealing, that nonetheless there were certain characteristics which were, inverted commas, out there. To suggest that beauty or aesthetic significance has an existence in the universe as real as matter or energy would be generally regarded as eccentric. We must be careful not to dismiss objective possibilities simply because subjective experiences can